Munga with the huge gainer on the doorstep now. Looking cross field. He's got Gene LaRue. Chuck, did Salt Lake just put this one to bed?
Welcome back. It's Swing Pass Week 8 preview pod coming at you. 14 games on tap coming up this weekend. The largest schedule of any weekend of the 2023 season. We will only be taking a nibble in this preview pod, talking about 4 games, but there is a slew of action on AUDL TV as we wind closer and closer to the 2023 AUDL playoffs. But we're going to take, again, a little bit more of a precision approach here today, try to get a little bit more in depth on some of these matchups. We'll be talking about the 2 Colorado games in Friday night in Salt Lake and then Saturday in Oakland, as well as the Friday night matchup in the East Division between the number 1 7-0 New York Empire and the number 2 4-2 Boston Glory. Their first matchup 2 weeks ago got very waylaid by some Tempest-like conditions in Boston. So 2 full-strength rosters finally set to go at it in New York on Friday night. Can't wait to see that battle of 2 longtime regional rivals. And then we'll also be talking about the border battle in the flexed-in Saturday night AUDL Game of the Week as the 5-1 Minnesota Wind Chill go on the road against the reeling Madison Radicals, who face a must-win situation at Breese Stevens Field. They are in a position they've never been in before. I know we've been saying that for weeks, but now is officially the time to hit the panic button. We'll be talking about what they can do in their matchup against the Wind Chill, who look impressive, but at the same time still have some weak spots that could be exploited. Let's get right into it. Let's start with Colorado. Right at the top, we get a rematch of last week's epic battle between the Shred and the Summit again in Week 8. I love these kind of rebounds where you get it one weekend and then immediately the next. Daniel, what are you looking forward
this week?
Tomorrow night in Salt Lake as the Summit look to avenge their first loss of the season to the just rallying Salt Lake team? Salt Lake playing without Grant Lindsley last weekend. We thought that might have an impact for the Shred. It didn't in their overall result. They get him back this weekend. They're looking completely full strength, in full confidence. I have them number 2 in my power rankings this week. They look like the second best team in the league other than New York to this point in the season. What are you anticipating? I know I already asked you a question and then just kept rambling, but
no, that's fine.
What are you most looking forward to?
To me, the headlining thing about the lineups, at least, is the absence of Jonathan Nethercutt. You know, he was active last week for Colorado against the Shred, but they did some weird Nethercutt Spicer switching for the first half, where Nethercutt played D-line, Spicer was playing offense.
What did you think about that?
I didn't love it. I mean, clearly it didn't work out great in Colorado's favor. And we were talking a bit about this before the show. The fact that Colorado is like the way they can like really aggressively punch other teams, especially early in games, and like set the tone with highlight reel plays. Nethercutt is like the driving force behind that. So when you take that away and you're just relying on like patient, more flowy offense that doesn't really have like a pure anchor, I just think it allowed Salt Lake to really seize the momentum advantage and like have more big plays of their own, especially early on, without Nethercutt like constantly threatening like a big offensive run by the Summit. So it's not that I don't like Cody Spicer offensively, although that is another part of it, where I just think he's such an asset on defense. And I think on offense, while he's good, he's also just like kind of a cog and part of the system, where I don't think he's like as integral to what that O-line needs to be doing as he is like impactful as a defender. So it's that too. And Colorado only had 5 blocks against Salt Lake. And like without that constant defensive intensity that Spicer brings to the D-line, I think they just kind of struggled to really set a tone against the Shred. So I'm hopeful that Spicer switches back to kind of full-time defense in this game against the Shred. I am interested to see what like no Nethercutt does for this Colorado offense, because they did have a successful game against Oakland, the one other game that Nethercutt did not play this weekend. Colorado, of course, put up 27 in that game, which may have been a season high for them. So like the scoring potential is obviously still there. It's just, yeah, like I just don't know if they're going to be able to like out highlight the Shred, especially playing in Salt Lake where the Shred really, really rally behind that home crowd.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a team more high octane right now than the Shred playing at home in front of that Zion Bank Diet Coke fueled up Shred crowd. The Shred heads, man, like they go at it. That's a great home crowd. I think other than outside of Breese Stevens, that's got to be one of the most raucous environments to play in right now. I mean,
I also, real quick, I want to shout out their streams. I love that they go to like their fan dancing shots like throughout the game. Like no other stream does that, where they kind of like treat the stream like a jumbotron at the game. But yeah, there's constant energy in that stadium, which is really awesome to see. But last year, it was like Colorado that kind of came in and seized that energy from the start. So like, do you think that has the potential to happen again?
No, there's just a totally different feel for the Salt Lake team this year. Last year, they had this kind of almost like nervous moxie to them, right? They were so young. They wanted to come out and show themselves. We didn't know what to expect going into week one. We knew like 6 players on that Shred lineups roster heading into that San Diego game. And they just came out in that first month, totally proved themselves as this powerful team out in the West. But there was kind of always this like hanging crucible of there's Colorado, man. Like they've got these thoroughbreds on this team that have proven themselves for damn near a decade in this league that are just going to outperform you. And I think in the first matchup of 2022 between Salt Lake and Colorado, there was much more of a kind of tension as Salt Lake, I think, elevated their execution, knew to reduce their mistakes. And then that second matchup, to your point about what happened when Colorado came in and barnstormed the Shred at home, I think it was this sort of like overburden of expectations. The Shred wanted to come and show out in front of their home crowd. They had this kind of like,
They've been rolling.
Yeah, and I think they had, I think they set themselves up a little too high in terms of what they wanted to do in terms of the level of playmaking. And you could see them relax more into that in the second half when they started to have the like spike off between the various members of the Shred defense and Alex Atkins on the summit. And it's like, there was wonderful energy. And yet at the same time, every single time Colorado scored, it was like they could just point to the scoreboard. And meanwhile, the Shred are going bananas being down by 5. And it was an odd energy, right? And I feel like that oddness, that sort of combustibility that the Shred had last season is totally gone now. Like this is a laser focused contender this year. And I think they really proved that last weekend where their offense wasn't the most efficient it's ever been, but man, they didn't commit any critical turnovers. They played every point through. They didn't give up any easy breaks to the summit. Every single time the Colorado team had to punch in a break, they had to earn it working the field against the Shred O-line and coverage. Like there's just, there's a confidence, a trust, and a skill level right now for the Shred that is vastly different than where it was at last year. And I think that just sets them up totally different. And to that point, their talisman in kind of that confidence and rebuild this year, Grant Lindsley, is active again this week. And I think he's just going to be another reminder that, the best player on the field at any given time is probably going to be wearing a Shred jersey, right? And last year, that wasn't the case in these matchups. Colorado could claim pretty confidently the top 3 to 5 players. This year, it's more debatable. And I think that closing of the gap is just what's kind of gone on between these two teams. And I think Colorado is working through some lineup adjustments, obviously with the absence of Nethercutt, but also to their kind of size defensively. I mean, once again, their rookie defensive sensation side, Semrin, will not be active in this game. Kai Marshall is listed as dressed, but hasn't been cleared to play yet. He's been out for a couple weeks. Some of the size that we anticipated from this Colorado defense heading into the season hasn't quite materialized when they've been dealing with some absences to their rotation. And you've seen in recent weeks, opponents are starting to take advantage of that. And similar to how their offense lacks a certain punchiness without Nethercutt, I feel like all of a sudden the defensive intensity and playmaking that was there in the first few weeks of the season and going back into last year for Colorado it's turned down a notch, and they're losing that bombastic quality, that kind of swagger that they had all of last year. It's just
right.
It's not quite there, and you see them almost having a little bit, not a crisis, but like an identity adjustment where, to your point, like they won't be with Leathercut, they won't be some of their defensive starters. They have to play this style that hasn't really been a part of their system too much. I think they're absolutely capable of doing it, but it's a lot of shifting pieces in the face of a shred team that seems to know exactly what it wants to do on each and every possession it goes out there, right? Like they've got their matchups down. They know who's going to play in what situation. And with Colorado, it's still very much, okay, we're working some players back in from, injury. Like Alex Atkins is just back from his third game after missing some time with the labrum tear. Like there's more moving pieces to this Colorado team in 2023 than last year, is what I'm trying to say, before I go off on like 10 different more tangents.
For sure. No, I totally agree. I think from like a top to bottom team identity standpoint, I'd give the Shred a pretty significant advantage at this point in the season. And back to Nethercut's absence, I did look at what he did last year when they went to Salt Lake. 7 assists. He completed 6 of 7 hucks. He did have 5 throwaways, but it's like the forever debate about Nethercut. Like, do you take the big playability with the throwaway potential? And I do think this offense without Nethercut obviously has it in them to have like a more efficient game. But again, just in terms of like really seizing that energy and sparking momentum for your own team, I don't think anyone does it better than Nethercut. And like Quinn Finer has some deep throws to his game, and he has like evolved, I think, as a thrower this year compared to last year. So it's not like they don't have the pieces that are capable of making these big plays. I just think when you're lacking that main engine, it's a tough ask to compete with a team like Salt Lake.
You know who was big last weekend in most of these Shred Summit matchups, though, and could play an even bigger role this weekend? Jay Frood. I mean, I kind of expect like huge games from Frood, Finer, and Atkins. I could really see them sort of understanding the implications of not having Nethercut and needing that excess level of playmaking. Like each of those three are all AUDL caliber players, and I really expect them to kind of understand what going down 0-2 in the season series to Salt Lake could mean. Like this is a Colorado team that completely expected to host a playoff game again this year as the 1 seed. And it's kind of trending right now like they might do it as the 2 seed. And if they're not careful, and this is what we can kind of get into to set up the Oakland game next, is that all of a sudden, with Oakland's rising, with the Shred improving, with the Summit losing a game last weekend, if Colorado isn't careful and they drop both games this weekend, they still have a game against New York on the schedule. And all of a sudden, a 4-loss regular season is on the table for the Summit team. And it's quite frankly something I did not expect to be saying going into 2023 whatsoever. I still think it's relatively unlikely. I think Colorado has a lot of talent, but clearly there's some work throughness to get through for the Summit team right now. I mean, they're going to have a tough test on Friday, and then on Saturday, they're going to have to turn around and face an Oakland team that has all the confidence in the world on offense and really wants to show you what they can do with their young defense and being able to get breaks and out hustle you in transition. And Oakland may be without 2 of their bigger offensive pieces in Mac Hecht and Chris Lung, who are both currently listed as questionable for Saturday night, which could really, really benefit this Summit team. But at the same time, without Hecht and Lung in the lineup, this might be the true test of the next generation of Spiders playmakers in Keenan Lawrence, Walker Frankenberg, Dexter Clyburn, and Raekwon Atkins, all of whom have shown an ability to be stars at this level. And man, if they get a little bit going, a little bit of juice against the Summit on Saturday night, they could make it hell for Colorado coming out of altitude and having to cover all that athleticism in open space. I think the Spiders are still very, very turnover and mistake prone given some of the youngness and the newness of these rotations. But man, you see when they get the ball rolling, they love to surge on the momentum. They are such a team of runs and just amplifying the playmaking that happens. You know, one guy starts making it, another Spiders player seems to be right behind them. I still like Colorado, regardless of what happens on Friday night, because of the quality of this Summit team. And yet at the same time, the longer I look at this matchup, I think this is looking pretty favorable for the Spiders, with or without Hecht or Lung in the lineup. And that's crazy to say. Like, obviously,
I don't know.
I think they improve. I think they improve with Hecht and Lung. I want to be very, very clear there. I'm just saying the next generation of Spiders playmakers looks so good in the first half of the season that you give them an opportunity to confidence build and possibly get a win against the reigning divisional champs. And that's just going to be a nitrous booster to this Oakland franchise.
Yeah, I think Hecht has basically been their Pavel this year. And like, I don't think you can just remove him from the equation. Really, him and Lung have been like one of the best 1-2 punches as throwing tandems in the entire league. And I love all the rest of that O-line, because I don't know, I was thinking about it earlier this week, how I guess I thought of it as like a big three with Hecht, Lung, and Keenan. And then I was like, oh, but there's also Frankenberg, and then there's also Magsig, and then also Kleiber. Like, they have literally a full line of like really talented young players. I think their average age, if I'm not mistaken, I thought I saw this on Keenan's Instagram story, is 22 and a half years old. Between
that sounds right. I mean, they've got a couple teenagers. Aren't Clyburn and Adkins both teenagers?
I think so. Yeah, I think they are.
I think Clyburn's like a sophomore at Cal or coming off of his freshman year. Adkins is
absolutely in high school. Ridiculous. I think this team, while obviously young, like, we have seen what they can look like at their ceiling. I would just worry if you take away kind of who have been the main cogs of this team, which have been Lung and Hecht this year, that maybe the other pieces start to get a little bit more pressure and maybe crumble a bit. So I would favor Colorado by, like, I don't know, 3.5, maybe 4.5 if Chris, Lung, and Hecht are out. But if they play, I would only favor the Colorado by like a point, probably, because Oakland's also good at home. They took Salt Lake to overtime and like arguably should have won that game. So this is like a fully capable Oakland squad when they're at full strength, when they're playing at home. And I think we saw it on the road too, when they went to Salt Lake and went to Colorado. They clearly belong in the conversation for the playoffs and in the conversation of teams that can emerge from this West Division.
I don't disagree with anything that you're saying, and I think you're absolutely right about Hecht and Lung being some of the most impressive engine pieces to any offense in the league this season. You know, Lung had an all-star year last year, and he looks completely evolved this year as this even more mobile receiving threat. The way that he activates in the red zone, the rapport he has with Hecht in their first season playing together is just incredible. And you know, to your point about Hecht, I mean, he's been the absolute clear case QB1 for this team, around which everything else just kind of flows and attacks.
They needed that.
Because of the excitement I have for these young players, I think that there's a sort of they're too young to know better quality, where if those guys are absent, they might just go out there and say, hey, let's just go do it. Like, to your point of that 22 and a half average age or whatever, like, they don't know how good some of this Colorado team is. They don't really care about the accolades, you know, like half these Summit players won a club division title last fall. That's like way in the rearview mirror of the development of half of the Spiders franchise, you know, they're about the now. And so I guess that's my only point about if there are absences of the caliber of Hecht and Lung, that I feel like if there is a team to sort of seize on the audaciousness of sort of like an Ewing theory, missing your star players, sort of going away from heliocentrism, like I think it's this Oakland team. I think they have the kind of spark that can really fuel that kind of upset. But I totally agree. I think if Hecht and Lung are out of the lineup, that a 4-goal favor for the Summit is totally reasonable. I think that's within the ballpark. I'm just saying, well, then you're getting score updates of Oakland being up 2 in the third without those two. Don't be surprised. Don't be surprised.
Do you see this game? The last thing is just like, I think Oakland's been a part of a lot of high scoring games this year, a lot of shootouts. Do you see this game going the same way? I mean, it was 27-22, I think was the final score when they played in Colorado. You think this will be another, 22 plus goals per team type of game?
Yeah, I generally think with Colorado playing the game before, absent some defenders, absent Nut, that Spiders are going to want to turn this into a track meet, going to really want to speed test the Summit. And the Summit also are working back numerous of their defensive playmakers from other injuries, like Matthew Agee has missed time this season. Noah Coleman's been banged up. Like, they've had to really work through some stuff and not been at full strength. And so I think being a younger team, being on the only game of your weekend, Oakland's just kind of like stress test them. And I don't know that I see Oakland right now as being a team that wins a game where both teams are scoring sub 20 points, right? Like, they don't
like a Colorado type win.
They don't quite have that offensive refinement. I don't think it fits their skill set. I think they need the confidence boost of, hucking it to Lawrence deep and having him come down with these one-on-one jump balls, of testing Clyburn just running out into space and seeing how far you can throw it, and he goes and gets it. I think they need those plays, and so I think they need that kind of volatility. I think that's what's made them successful and made them punchy this year. I think if you turn it into precision ball, that's where you put it in the hands of Alex Atkins and Quinn Finer, who are just much, much more adept and have more chemistry than any development on Oakland so far. And so I just feel like if you're going to be reducing the overall score, you're kind of facilitating into a Summit mindset that they've played in a couple times this year. They win games 18-14. Like, they were in a game 19-18 last weekend that they almost pulled out despite underperforming by their standards. Like, that is how the 2023 Summit win. I feel like last year you didn't want to push them into a track meet. That was exactly where Colorado wanted you as the number 2 hucking team in the league. This year, it's still developing. And so I think they want to lean more on possession base, grind it out, rely on our defense. We'll get it there on offense. Like, last weekend, they performed the Salt Lake offense by, I think, 17% in offensive efficiency.
Yeah.
They were the more solid team on offense. I think they want to play that slow it down game more. I think the Shred just were unbelievable in converting 9 of 9 on break opportunities last year. They were perfect on defense. Like, that's how you win games. So I don't think that Oakland can be that kind of perfection on defense to win those kind of closer interaction matchups. But who knows? This season is about, I think, proving a lot of preconceptions wrong. There's been a lot of upsets and volatility throughout this entire league. And to that point, we should move into our East Division matchup on Friday night. Boston 4-2 taking on the undefeated 7-0 New York Empire. Empire going for their 26th straight win at home, dating all the way back to 2018. Second longest winning streak ever, I believe now. I think it's surpassed Dallas's home winning streak and now only falls shy of Madison's multi-year run at Breese Stevens Field. I think I'll have to verify that.
I was going to say, I would think Madison has the top.
Madison definitely has the longest. Right? I just can't remember how long exactly Dallas's home winning streak was from 2016 until, well, I guess the Cannons beat them in 2017 in that crazy Jeremy Langdon game.
Oh yeah,
so I don't think so. I think we don't need to belabor it that much, but New York, they're going for their 26th straight win at home. They haven't been beaten at home since the 2018 season against a Boston team that is 4-2, but still I think needs to kind of prove itself as being a true playoff caliber team in 2023. And they will absolutely get that ability on Friday night. This will be a full strength Boston roster. Heading on the road, they are already 2-0 on the road this season after having 0 road wins last year. Of course, both those wins coming in Montreal against a reeling Royale team. Boston, again, just needing, I think, a good, solid showing after last Friday night, getting a test against Atlanta and coming up with a 6-goal loss. Even sticking close against New York, I think will be really vital as they kind of get set to do battle with Philly for that 3rd spot in the East Division. What do you want from the Glory in this matchup, and what can they maybe do to pull off a historic upset against a heavily favored New York team at home?
It's going to be so tough. I'll be honest, I don't see them winning this game. But I will say, in games that they've had, particularly Orion Cable active since they became a team, I think it's been 4 meetings. Cable's been active. Glory has lost by 4 or fewer in all of those meetings to New York. So, like, they're not getting blown out by New York when they have their top lineup of guys. And I will say last week, they did not have Ben Sadok. They didn't have Orion Cable. I think Atlanta played well against them, but I don't know. I don't think I would count that as like a blowout or really such a negative loss for Boston, especially being able to rebound the very next day in Montreal. So I think Boston's going to have their work cut out for them. I think right now they just need to like get their offense in rhythm early, especially because New York, based on what we saw last week against Atlanta, like I think this New York team, they just need like a good weather game, and then they're just like off and running, and then they're probably going to continue peaking as the season goes on. So I don't think there's much they're going to be able to do defensively to take New York out of rhythm. So I just put the pressure back on the Glory offense to somehow maintain pace with New York. And if you can get Sadok going early, get Orion Cable open in the deep space. He had 7 goals in the last full game they played against New York in 2022. They played that half game, that weird weather game earlier this year. That I don't know. I feel like I throw that away in terms of stats, in terms of counting, whatever. But yeah, it's going to be tough because also New York is going to come out. If Ryan Ozar gets in rhythm early, like he did against Atlanta, and he's just connecting with Lithio and Babbitt deep, Boston kind of has to mentally answer and respond with like Sadok to Cable deep shots. Like if they don't like kind of match their big playability of New York, I don't see this game being particularly close.
I guess I just worry because I feel like Atlanta's approach last week of stripping away the big plays early, of just kind of marching these drives down, sticking close, like not allowing New York to really pull away at any point, other than that third quarter where the Hustle fell behind by 5 and they kind of rallied behind some defensive pressure. Feel like the Hustle had the right approach. I don't know that just going big play for big play is what you want to end up doing with an Empire team that has proven it will have the biggest punch at the end of every game. They have Jeff Babbitt, they have Jack Williams, they have Ben Yat, and they have Ryan Osgar, right? Like that is the 4 horsemen that has spelled doom for every team that gets close to the Empire over the past couple seasons. And I just feel like Boston almost has to show like a pitch or a style that they haven't really shown before. To your point about their offense, I think they kind of need to go away from just relying on the Orion Cable jump balls when he's active in the lineup. I feel like they need to develop something a little bit more like Ben Sadok centric, work it up, distribution, possession based offense, because there's just not enough of a chance right now against this New York defense of just trying to play them straight up and go make plays on them. Like that is what New York lines up every single point and wants you to try and do against them. They are the stoutest defense ever in terms of just lining up and giving you absolute hell 1 through 7 matchup. And I feel like Boston always wants to play that way. They want to kind of like isolate their playmakers, let Cable go up and grab jump balls, let Tetro go beat people in space with the speed. And this is like the defense that you can't do that against. You have to present a united front of some kind. And again, I feel like that's where Atlanta was successful. They sort of stripped away the pretense of their individual playmakers. And it was this sort of, Draco getting open for receiving goals, Christian Olsen and Max Thorne being these kind of mobile weaponized throwers. Like it showcased the versatility of the Hustle attack. And I feel like that's what Boston really needs to showcase in this. They can't just be this sort of vertical run offense that they like to employ at times.
I agree with you in theory, but I think we've seen this year, Atlanta has clearly evolved their offense to the point that they can play different styles, and like they have the luxury of not overly relying on big plays all the time, like actually being able to convert and out-convert opponents just with like steady offensive movement. I just don't think Boston has that in them. I don't think we've seen it from them ever in their franchise history. So like if they try that against New York, I think Boston's still maybe a little bit too mistake prone. Like I don't count on them to have like a sub 15 turnover game. Like I just think they're going to make some bad throws in the backfield, like on resets, or like get D'd underneath by one of the Dross brothers. So like I don't know. I agree with you. Like it's not a great plan either way to just like try and take Cable versus Yacht deep, which I'm hoping for so much of that. I would love as many 50-50 balls to Cable and Yacht as possible. But yeah, I just like haven't seen it from Boston that they can like really churn out a lot of offensive possessions, especially like for a full 4 quarters.
I do feel like if New York has some of the offensive woes that they've shown at times before their Week 7 matchup against Atlanta, that this year's Glory defense has the pieces to take advantage of that. Rocco Linehan, Brendan McCann have been excellent at leading that transition counter for the Boston defense. And I do feel like Empire have to bring the same focus that they brought last weekend, even if they're thinking of it not quite in the same terms of matchup potential, right? Like I do think Boston's defense can make this game very, very dangerous for the home team if the Empire have one of their weirder games that they've had on offense a couple times this year. This isn't the pristine execution of the 2022 Empire. This is Babbitt ball, baby. Like we might not win every single time, but we are going to bruise you in the process of doing it. Like it is just not going to be fun to match up against this offense for 4 quarters. I'm really looking forward to this battle. Like you said, I don't really take that first matchup between these two teams as being like a real game. I know that the results count. It was 8-5, whatever. That's a write-off game. I want to see this matchup on Friday night. The other game that I want to see.
My last thing, I was going to say, I agree. I think with Boston, the most obvious improvement I've seen with their team is that D-line offense. Like they are fully capable of converting breaks now, and you do trust their D-line to get the job done. So agreed. If New York is at all shaky offensively, I do think Boston has the chance to keep pace defensively, even if their offense isn't playing the cleanest.
Yeah. Well, in the expediency of time, I want to get to the final game we'll be previewing on this matchup. Last but not least, the game of the week, Saturday night, Minnesota traveling to face Madison in a border battle between two of the oldest rivals in the league in the Central Division. 5-1 win chill facing off the reeling 1-4 Madison Radicals. Radicals losing 4 games by 5 goals at this point in the year. 3 of those coming in the final minute of the fourth quarter, 2 of those in the final 2 seconds of the fourth quarter. This is a young Madison team, I've continued to say it, who cannot catch a break, but they will be at home at Breese Stevens Field. They did get a win there 2 weeks ago. It felt like a little bit of revitalization that was much needed for this Madison franchise, and they are getting a Minnesota team that is dealing with a slew of injuries to their throwing lineup. Josh Klain listed as questionable. Abe Coffin is still out. Will Brandt is listed as questionable. This wind chill offensive attack is going through a little bit of an adjustment crisis. They've shown abilities at times to play good possession distributive attack, and at other times they've kind of given the game away and relied on the defense and its insanely high break conversion rate to sort of save the day. That could be trouble against the Radicals playing at home and playing with their very lives on the line, because look, 1-5 Madison Radicals is just kind of beyond the realm of imagination at this point. I know we've been talking about again for weeks that this has been unprecedented territory for the Radicals, that they've gone from 0-2 to 1-3 to 1, just this kind of backpedal. But it feels like, for all of the reeling, for all of the sort of heartache that the Radicals have undergone, with the tumult elsewhere in the Central Division, and with this wind chill team still looking a little vulnerable, if Minnesota doesn't kind of, put the White Walker down in the Madison Radicals this weekend and drop them to 1-5, a 2-4 Radicals team, given how closely they've played the rest of the Central Division, given that they're still battling back from injury, given that they expect some stars to come into their lineup in the coming weeks, if they get a little bit of breathing room, they feel like they could be a real problem for the rest of the Central Division. And it is almost like a duty for this wind chill team to kind of ensure there's no more bubbles for a Radicals team that lorded over the rest of these, Central Division opponents for years and years and years on end. Like this is both an incredible opportunity for Minnesota to put down their closest rival, and at the same time, something that Minnesota has never really been able to do, which is kind of close out a must-win game where they can put a rival to bed. Mm-hmm. And especially given the kind of, I think, difficulties that they're facing with their injuries, this would be a great time for Minnesota to kind of assert themselves as the divisional favorite that they think of themselves are. This is kind of an ability, I think, to show the resilience of this Minnesota team, something that maybe hasn't always been a part of the Wind Chill's success in the past. I feel like the Wind Chill have always been enormously talented, but you've seen in some of their matchups against Chicago and stuff in recent years, there's just an ability to let go of the rope. And so if they get this win in Madison, it just feels like, man, that will be such conviction in how strong of a competitor this Wind Chill team is going into the back half of their schedule.
Definitely. I mean, I've been impressed with Minnesota's resilience so far. I mean, they, like you said, their throwing absences, it's been ridiculous. I mean, in that Chicago game that they won in Minnesota, it was like only Tristan Van de Mortel was like their active thrower on offense. Like it was no Klain, no Will Brandt, no Abe Coffin, no Jason Sheeta. And they've just managed to like gut out these very like grindy wins. And they kind of did it again last week against Madison when it was really, again, just Klain and Tristan Van de Mortel leading the charge there. I don't really know how they're doing it, because on paper, like, you need throwers offensively. Like you need people that can really like get the system going, but they're getting enough production out of the backfield and still have the cutters downfield to like make the most of their possessions. And then defensively, they're just a team that is providing a lot of pressure. They have 3 Callahans this year. I believe that is the most in the league. Bevan got one last weekend to raise their total to 3. I just think this is a team that is like, they're winning the types of games in the Central that we've gotten so used to, like, I guess before Chicago started taking over, which are just like, the grindy, low scoring battles. And
Big Ten football and basketball.
Right. And Madison is like, Madison is the team that caused all of that narrative to happen in the Central Division. So yeah, I love how the stage is set right now for Minnesota going into Madison. Madison backs against the wall. Like, they have shown every single week that they can play with any team in the Central Division. Like, they could easily be a 1 seed if not for a few, hiccups late in the game. And obviously, like, the late game stuff does matter. I, at this point, would not have faith in Madison to really like close out a playoff game if they do make the playoffs. But still, like, talent-wise, they're right at the same level as these other teams. So I think it's a, like you said, huge opportunity for Madison to kind of right their ship. And then, if Minnesota can close the door on Madison, I think that can be like a season-defining win in a lot of ways, even though record-wise, it's not like they need this win, right? Like, and they will presumably get more healthy throughout the years. Like, this is by no means the top Wind Chill lineup, but I still think there is a lot of weight on this team just to close the door on Madison and stop them from lurking around the Central Division playoff race.
Yeah, quit lurking, Madison. Stop lurking. No.
Lurking is the perfect word for them right now. Is it not?
They are. And that's what I mean. It is such a razor's edge between the results in this game, because I agree in like a real sense, this game doesn't matter for Minnesota, and yet if they let Madison up off of the mat, it just feels like I felt it in the stadium when they finally beat Pittsburgh convincingly the other weekend. You could just feel this young Radicals team just relax a little bit more, get a little bit confident in their playmaking, their throws, take an additional level up. There isn't the kind of tightness that settles in around the team. And it's like, if they get that win against first place Minnesota and say, hey, we're as good as the best team, screw it if they don't have Coffin and Klain and whoever else in the lineup, we beat them. We'll beat them when we're more at full strength. Like, it changes the entire complexion of this playoff race going into the home stretch of the season. And I will luckily be in the booth alongside Evan Lepler and Megan Tormey on Saturday night. I can't wait to call that game. Love calling big games at Breese Stevens Field. Hasn't always been great for the home team in terms of results, but for the viewing audience, I can tell
It's
you,
always fun.
I'm good for like one absolutely bananas second half play every time I'm in the booth with Leffler. So really looking forward to that. We'll be wrapping up here on Swing Pass with the Week 8 recap. We will be back on Sunday in order to wrap everything up from the 14-game schedule after it's all concluded. Thank you so much for tuning in, as always. We love it here on Swing Pass. We hope to see you soon. Bye now.